"Sir, your wife isn't dead. I know where she is. 2 long, endless years. Every week, same day, same bouquet of white roses." Jude Nelson, the richest man in the city, still knelt before the ice-cold stone gravestone in the pouring rain, kneeling to apologize to his lost wife, kneeling to hear his heart shatter once more, kneeling to forget that it was he who let Rebecca board that fateful yacht, and she never returned. Then from the gray curtain of rain, a small figure stepped out. A girl 17 years old, barefoot clothes, drenched hair plastered to her face, stood just a few meters away, lips trembling, eyes red and swollen, but her voice stabbed straight into his heart like a blade. "Sir, your wife isn't dead." Jude froze. The rain hammered his face like thousands of needles. He whipped around, voice hoarse and raw. "What did you say?" The girl didn't retreat. She opened her trembling hand. A delicate silver bracelet lay in her palm-thin chain, small flower pendant engraved with 2 initials, J and R. The bracelet he had fastened on Rebecca the night he proposed under a sky full of stars. The bracelet with a tiny scratch on the left side, a scratch only the 2 of them knew, never appearing in any photograph, any article. The bracelet that should have lain deep beneath the earth in the coffin together with his wife's body. Jude's heart seemed to stop. The air was sucked away. The rain fell heavier, as if trying to drown the entire cemetery. This belonged to her," the girl whispered, tears spilling over. "She gave it to me 3 weeks ago. She said if she ever disappeared, I had to find you. She said you would recognize the scratch. She said, she's still alive. And she's running." Jude felt the world collapse beneath his feet. 2 years kneeling at a fake grave. 2 years placing white roses on an empty stone. 2 years living with the pain that he had let his wife die at sea. And now standing before him was living proof. A barefoot girl shivering in the rain, holding evidence that Rebecca, the woman he loved more than life itself, had faked her death. Someone had stolen 2 years from him. Someone had let him kneel before an empty grave, and that someone might have been standing right beside him the whole time. He lunged forward, seizing the bracelet. His trembling fingers touched the familiar scratch. Tears he thought had long run dry poured out uncontrollably. Who did this?" His voice shattered, almost a roar. "Who took her from me?" The girl looked straight into his eyes, her voice soft but razor sharp. "I don't know." But she said, "If you believe me, you have to go now. Because they're getting close. And this time, they won't let her live." At that exact moment, headlights sliced through the downpour. A black car stopped at the cemetery gate. Doors opened. Figures stepped out, tall, long coats, hands hidden in pockets. Jude shoved the girl behind him. His right hand was already on the gun concealed under his expensive vest. Rain poured relentlessly. His heart pounded like it was about to explode. He turned back, voice so cold it could freeze the storm itself. "Don't come any closer. Touch her once, and you'll regret the day you were born." Tension choked the air. Rain fell. Guns were cocked. And a billionaire who had lost everything now stood in the middle of a graveyard shielding a stranger girl, the one carrying a secret that could bring down his entire empire. 2 years of agony ended in a single moment. But the real nightmare had only just begun. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change life. October 2025, Chicago. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a sharp, early autumn bite that sliced through even the heaviest wool coats. Rose Hill Cemetery lay on the north side, vast and silent under a slate-gray sky, its older sections dotted with weathered limestone angels and granite obelisks half swallowed by ivy. Most visitors came on weekends in daylight, left small tokens, and departed quickly. Vincent Harlan, known to the city's shadows as Vince Harlan, came every Sunday at dusk alone. He was a tall man, fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, in his mid-40s, dressed in a charcoal cashmere overcoat that cost more than many families earned in a year. The coat hung open tonight as though the cold meant nothing to him. His face was handsome, in a hard-carved way, high cheekbones, pale blue eyes that rarely blinked, a jawline shadowed by precisely trimmed stubble. People who recognized him in the streets usually looked away fast. He controlled territories, moved money, settled debts. He was wealthy beyond most imaginations, powerful enough that judges and aldermen returned his calls. Yet here, in this forgotten corner of the cemetery, he knelt like any grieving son or husband, placing white lilies against a simple granite marker no larger than a legal pad. The stone read only Elena Marie Whitaker, beloved mother, October 15th, 2016. No last name shared with him, no photograph, just the date and those 3 words. Vince had chosen them himself 9 years earlier, when the fire department handed him a charred bracelet and a death certificate. He had stood in the rain that day too, watching the coffin lowered into earth that felt too soft for the weight it now carried. Since then, every Sunday he returned. Same time, same flowers, same silence. Tonight the lilies trembled in his gloved hand. He set them down carefully, fingers lingering on the cold stone as though he could still feel warmth through it. His breath clouded in the air. Inside his chest, something gnawed guilt that had grown teeth over the years, remorse that woke him at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of his Gold Coast penthouse. He had not been good enough then, not present enough, not safe enough. Elena had been 19 when they met, soft-spoken, working double shifts at a diner on Clark Street to pay for night classes. He had been 21 already, running errands for men who carried guns instead of briefcases. She had seen something redeemable in him. He had seen light in her. For a handful of months they had stolen time together, walks along the lakefront, coffee in paper cups, her head on his shoulder while the L train rattled overhead. Then she disappeared. Weeks later, the fire. The police called it accidental. Vince knew better, even if he could never prove it. Someone had wanted her gone. Someone had wanted him to stay sharp, unburdened, ruthless. He pressed his palm flat against the granite. The stone drank the heat from his skin. "Still miss you," he said quietly, the words swallowed by the wind. No one answered. No one ever did. He stayed there longer than usual, knees sinking into damp grass, coat pooling around him like spilled ink. The guilt twisted deeper tonight, sharper, more violent. 9 years. A child would have been 9 now if she had lived. He forced the thought down the way he always did. Some wounds you learn to carry without bleeding on the carpet. Across the path, hidden behind a crumbling mausoleum, a small figure watched him. She was 9 years old, thin to the point of fragility, wearing a threadbare navy coat, 2 sizes too large, that had once belonged to someone else. Her jeans were patched at both knees, sneakers held together with duct tape. Dark hair hung in uneven strands around a face pale from too many skipped meals and too many nights when the heat in her mother's apartment had been turned off. Lily Whitaker had not eaten since yesterday's half sandwich. Her stomach cramped in protest, but she ignored it. She had come here for a reason. Her mother had drilled the instructions into her for weeks, voice low and urgent in their single room on the south side. "If anything happens to me, if I don't come home one night, you go to Rose Hill. Every Sunday at dusk a man brings white lilies to that stone. You show him this." She had pressed the silver ID bracelet into Lily's palm, old-fashioned, the kind soldiers once wore, engraved with a tiny heart, and 2 initials, V and E. Lily had worn it under her sleeve ever since the metal warm against her skin, like a secret heartbeat. Now she stepped out from behind the mausoleum. Gravel crunched under her sneakers. The wind caught her coat and flapped it like a broken wing. She walked straight toward the kneeling man, heart hammering so hard she felt dizzy. When she was 10 feet away, she stopped. Her voice came out small, polite, trembling. Sir Vince did not move at first. He thought the wind had carried a child's voice from somewhere else. Then it came again, clearer. "Sir, please." He turned his head slowly. A girl, small, soaked barefoot inside shoes that looked ready to disintegrate, stood in the middle of the path. No gloves, no hat. Eyes huge and dark in a face that spoke of hunger and cold and nights without enough blankets. She clutched something in her fist so tightly her knuckles showed white. Vince rose in one fluid motion, towering over her. His first instinct was to glance around for parents, for a threat, for anyone who might be using a child as bait. Nothing. Just graves and wind, and the girl looking up at him with an expression that mixed terror and determination. "What are you doing here?" His voice was low, careful the way he spoke when he did not yet know the rules of the game. Lily swallowed. Her teeth chattered. I came to find you. My mom said if she ever disappeared, I should come here. Every Sunday. To the man with the white lilies." Vince felt the world tilt half a degree. "Your mom," she nodded, opened her hand. The silver bracelet lay on her palm, catching the last gray light. V and E. The tiny heart. The faint scratch on the clasp from the night Elena had caught it on a car door and laughed about it. Vince stared. His pulse roared in his ears. He had not seen that bracelet in 9 years. It had been on Elena's wrist the last time he kissed her goodbye. The fire report said nothing survived. Yet here it was real heavy, impossible. He reached out slowly. His fingers closed around the bracelet. Cold metal. Real weight. Real scratch. Memories slammed into him like a fist. Elena, tilting her head, smiling, saying, You're gonna be somebody big someday, Vince. Just don't forget the little people." He had laughed then. He was not laughing now. "Where did you get this?" His voice cracked on the last word. He hated that it cracked. "My mom gave it to me 3 weeks ago," she said. "She said you'd know it was real. She said you'd remember the scratch." Lily's eyes filled. "She hasn't come home. She told me to find you. She said you'd help." Vince felt something inside him fracture, something he had kept locked behind steel for 9 years. Guilt surged up hot and violent. If Elena was alive, if this child was telling the truth, then he had mourned a lie. He had built an empire on the bones of that lie. And if Elena was alive, someone had made sure he believed she was dead. Someone had kept her from him. Someone had kept a child from him. He looked down at Lily. She was shaking harder now, whether from cold or fear he could not tell. Her lips were blue. Her coat hung off her like a defeated flag. She looked so small, so breakable, and yet she had walked through a Chicago autumn evening to find a stranger she had been told was dangerous. He shrugged off his overcoat without thinking. The cashmere settled around her shoulders, enveloping her like a blanket. She stared up at him, confused, wary. "You're freezing," he said. "Simple fact. No room for argument." Lily pulled the coat tighter. It smelled of expensive cologne and rain. "I'm okay." "No, you're not." He glanced around again. Still no one. "Where's home?" She hesitated. "South Side. Near 63rd. Too far to walk. Too dangerous for a child alone at night." Vince felt the old instincts rise, protect, control, fix. But underneath them, something fiercer burned, a sudden overwhelming surge of responsibility that had no name yet but felt like love at first sight. Not romantic, not possessive, paternal, primal. This girl carried Elena's bracelet. This girl carried Elena's eyes. This girl might be. He cut the thought off. "Not yet. Not here. Come with me," he said. "We'll get you warm. Then you tell me everything." Lily looked at the lilies on the grave, then back at him. "You promise you won't hurt me?" The question pierced him deeper than any knife ever had. He knelt so they were eye level. "I swear on her stone. I will never hurt you." She searched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Vince stood, offered his hand. She placed hers in it, small, cold, trusting against every instinct that should have screamed run. He felt the tremor in her fingers. He felt his own heart stutter in answer. They walked toward the black SUV waiting at the gate. Behind them, the white lilies bent in the wind, fragile against the granite. The cemetery watched in silence as a mafia boss led a shivering 9-year-old girl into the night carrying a bracelet that should have burned, and a guilt that finally had teeth sharp enough to bite back. The rain came harder now, slanting sideways across Rose Hill Cemetery like sheets of broken glass. The drops struck Vince Harlan's uncovered shoulders and ran in cold rivulets down the back of his neck, but he barely registered them. His world had narrowed to the small silver bracelet resting in his palm, and the child standing before him soaked to the bone, eyes wide with the particular bravery that only comes from having nothing left to lose. Lily Whitaker did not flinch when the wind whipped her wet hair across her face. She stood perfectly still, the too large coat he had draped over her sagging off one thin shoulder sleeves dangling past her fingertips. The coat cashmere tailored in Milan, worth more than the rent on her mother's apartment for 2 full years, looked absurd on her like a child playing dress-up in a king's robe. Yet she clutched the lapels with both hands as though afraid someone might snatch it away. Her sneakers squelched with every tiny shift of weight. One lace had come undone and trailed in the mud like a defeated flag. Vince could not look away from her face. The resemblance was not immediate, not obvious in the way movies make such things obvious. It was in the shape of the cheekbones, the slight upward tilt at the corners of the eyes when she was trying not to cry, the way her lower lip trembled before she spoke. 9 years ago, Elena had worn that same expression, when she told him she was leaving Chicago, fear wrapped in quiet resolve. Now that expression lived on this child's face, and the recognition hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. He closed his fingers around the bracelet until the edges bit into his skin. The metal was still warm from her hand. "How long has she been gone?" he asked. His voice sounded rough, foreign to his own ears. 10 days, Lily whispered. She didn't say goodbye. She just didn't come home from work. Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed hard, trying to hold herself together the way children do when they have learned too early that crying makes everything worse. "She told me if that happened, I should come here. Every Sunday. Look for the white lilies. Look for you." Vince felt the ground shift beneath him. Not metaphorically, the actual earth seemed to tilt. He had spent 9 years believing Elena dead. 9 years building walls of money and muscle and silence around the hollow place she left. 9 years telling himself the guilt was punishment enough. Now this child, small, shivering, impossibly brave, stood in front of him, holding proof that the grave he had mourned at was empty. He looked down at her feet. The sneakers were not just worn, they were coming apart. The soles had separated from the uppers, in places exposing raw skin. No socks. Her toes were blue with cold. The sight sent a fresh wave of something violent through him, rage at whoever had let a child walk barefoot in October rain, shame that he had lived in heated penthouses while she endured this. And beneath both a fierce protective ache that felt like it might tear him open. "You walked here?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Bus to the north side. Then I walked the rest. Mom said you'd be here." The arithmetic was brutal. From the south side to Rose Hill was at least 12 miles. A 9-year-old. In the rain. Alone. Vince's jaw tightened until it ached. He glanced toward the wrought iron gates. His black Escalade-weighted engine, idling tinted windows reflecting the storm. His driver, Tommy, loyal for 15 years, had not moved from the wheel. Good. No questions yet. Questions could wait. Another gust of wind slammed into them. Lily staggered. Vince caught her elbow without thinking. Her arm felt like a bird's wing, fragile, trembling. She looked up at him, startled, then quickly looked away, cheeks flushing with shame. She tried to pull back, but he did not let go. Not roughly. Just enough to steady her. "You're going to get sick," he said. "I'm fine," she lied, voice barely audible. "No. You're not." He released her elbow, but stayed close. "I'm taking you somewhere warm. Food, dry clothes. Then we talk about your mom." Lily's eyes darted to the grave, then back to him. "You promise you won't. You won't hurt me." The question landed like a blade between his ribs. He knelt again, bringing his face level with hers. Rain dripped from his hair onto the muddy path. "I swear on everything I have left," he said slowly. "I will not hurt you. I will not let anyone hurt you. Not tonight. Not ever again if I can help it." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, small, decisive. Vince stood, offered his hand again. This time she took it without hesitation. Her fingers were ice. He closed his around them carefully as though she might shatter. They started walking toward the gate. Halfway there, headlights cut through the rain, high beams moving fast along the cemetery road. A dark sedan, older model, no plates visible in the downpour. It slowed as it approached them, then stopped 20 yards away. Doors opened. 2 men stepped out. Heavy coats, hands in pockets, faces shadowed under hoods. Vince's body language changed instantly. Shoulders squared. Free hand drifted toward the concealed holster beneath his jacket. He stepped in front of Lily without breaking stride, shielding her completely. "Stay behind me," he murmured. Lily pressed against his back. Her breathing came in shallow bursts. She could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a furnace. One of the men called out, voice carrying over the rain. "Harlan. A word." Vince did not stop walking. "Not tonight, Rossi." The man, Rossi, stepped forward. Mid-30s. Expensive suit ruined by the weather. "A competitor from the West Side faction that had been testing boundaries for months. We heard you've been distracted. Thought we'd check on you. See if the rumors are true." Vince's voice stayed calm. "Walk away, Rossi. This isn't the place." Rossi's gaze dropped to the child half hidden behind Vince. His mouth curved. "Got a soft spot for strays now, that's new." Vince felt the rage flare white-hot, blinding. Not for the insult to him. For the way Rossi looked at Lily. Like she was leverage. Like she was disposable. He stopped. Turned fully. Lily stayed glued to his back, small hands clutching the hem of his shirt. "Last warning," Vince said quietly. "Get in your car. Drive away. Or I make sure you crawl." Rossi laughed once, short, ugly. His companion shifted hand, moving inside his coat. Vince's voice dropped lower. "You touch that child, you die here. Simple as that." Silence stretched, broken only by rain on gravel. Rossi's smile faded. He glanced at his partner, then back at Vince. Something in Vince's face, cold, absolute certainty, made the decision for him. "Another time," Rossi said. He backed toward the car. "But we're watching Harlan. You're slipping." The sedan doors closed. Taillights flared red. The car reversed, then disappeared into the storm. Vince exhaled slowly. His hand shook once only before he forced it steady. He looked down at Lily. Her eyes were enormous pupils blown wide with fear. They know you," she whispered. "They know of me," he said. "That's different." He guided her forward again. This time he walked faster, coat shielding her from the worst of the wind. At the gate, Tommy opened the rear door without a word. Warm air spilled out, heated leather, faint scent of coffee from the console. Vince lifted Lily inside first. She hesitated on the running board, looking back at the cemetery one last time. The white lilies were already flattening against the stone. Then she climbed in. Vince followed. The door closed with a solid, expensive thunk. Inside the Escalade was another world. Soft, ambient lighting, heated seats, quiet enough to hear Lily's teeth chattering. She sat, rigid hands folded in her lap, eyes darting from the polished wood trim to the privacy glass to Vince's face and back again. Overwhelmed, terrified, curious despite herself. Vince reached into the console, pulled out a thick wool blanket emergency stash cashmere blend, and draped it over her lap. Then he pressed the button for the rear climate control. Warm air flowed gently. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, small and quick. "Thank you, sir." The formality, the politeness drilled into her by a mother who taught manners even in poverty, cut him deeper than any threat from Rossi. He leaned back, watching her, the bracelet still in his fist. The guilt inside him had grown claws. It tore now steadily, relentlessly. If Elena was alive, if this child was hers, if she had been raising a daughter alone while he lived in towers of glass and steel, he forced the thought down. Later. He would feel it all later. "Where to first?" he asked gently. "Food, dry clothes, or straight to wherever your mom might be." Lily looked at him, really looked. For the first time since she stepped out from behind the mausoleum, suspicion gave way to something else. Not trust, not yet, but a crack in the armor. A flicker of hope so fragile it hurt to see. "Food," she whispered. "Please. I haven't eaten since yesterday." Vince nodded once. "Tommy. Nearest 24-hour diner. No stops." The Escalade pulled smoothly away from the curb. Behind them, the cemetery faded into darkness. The grave waited, lilies sodden and forgotten. But the child in the back seat, small, hungry, carrying a bracelet that should have burned, had just changed everything. And Vince Harlan, who had spent 9 years believing love was a weakness he could no longer afford, felt the first terrifying stirrings of something he thought had died with Elena. Something that felt suspiciously like a father's heart waking up. The Escalade glided through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago's North Side, like a black shark moving beneath the surface. Inside the cabin was warm, almost oppressively, so after the cemetery's raw cold. Heated leather seats cradled Lily's small frame. The cashmere blanket Vince had draped across her lap felt impossibly soft against her thin jeans, soft in a way nothing in her life had ever been soft. She kept her hands folded on top of it, fingers laced tight as though touching the fabric too much might make it disappear. Vince sat beside her, not too close, giving her space. The bracelet rested on his knee now, silver catching the low glow of the dashboard lights. Every few seconds, his thumb traced the faint scratch on the clasp, the same scratch Elena had laughed about 9 years ago, when she banged her wrist against the door of his old Chevy pickup. "See now, it's got character," she had said, eyes bright. He could still hear her voice in the memory light and teasing. The sound of it now felt like broken glass in his throat. Lily watched him from the corner of her eye. She was trying not to stare at the interior, the polished wood trim, the soft blue ambient lighting, the quiet hum of the climate control that smelled faintly of new leather and something expensive. She had never been inside a car this clean, never sat on seats that did not have springs poking through. The contrast made her feel smaller, dirtier, more out of place. She pulled the blanket higher, hiding her patched knees. "Where are we going?" she asked, voice so soft it almost vanished under the rain, drumming on the roof. "Somewhere safe," Vince answered. "A place I keep for quiet nights. There's food, a shower, clothes that might fit you." Lily's stomach twisted. Hunger, yes, but also something sharper. Suspicion. She had been taught never to trust strangers, especially men with nice cars and calm voices. Yet this man had given her his coat without asking anything in return. He had stood between her and those other men at the cemetery gate like a wall. And he had looked at the bracelet the way her mother sometimes looked at old photographs, painful, reverent, like it hurt to remember. She swallowed. "You really knew my mom." Vince's jaw tightened. "I thought I did." The words hung between them. Lily felt the weight of them, even if she did not fully understand. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were bitten to the quick. There was a small cut on one knuckle from climbing a chain-link fence earlier that week, when the landlord locked the gate early. She hid it under the blanket. The Escalade turned onto Lakeshore Drive. The city lights blurred past in streaks of gold and red. Vince's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Tommy's name. He answered on speaker so Lily could hear. "Boss Tommy," said voice low. "We've got company. 2 cars half a mile back. Same plates as Rossi's crew. They're pacing us." Vince's expression did not change, but something cold and lethal moved behind his eyes. "How long? Since we left the cemetery." "They're keeping distance. Waiting to see where we go." Vince looked at Lily. She had gone very still, eyes wide. She understood enough to know danger when it followed. "Take the next exit," Vince told Tommy. "Loop through Streeterville. Lose them in the underground garage at the Hancock. Then head to the safe house on Dearborn. No stops." "Understood." The line went dead. Lily's breathing had become shallow. Are they bad people? They're people who want something from me, Vince said carefully. They think they can get it by following us. Lily looked out the tinted window. Rain streaked the glass in long tears. Because of me, Vince felt the question like a punch. No, because of me. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But even as he said it, the lie tasted bitter. She was not in the wrong place. She was exactly where someone had sent her, carrying proof that the past 9 years had been built on deception. And now that proof sat beside him, shivering, trusting him against every instinct she should have had. The Escalade took the exit ramp smoothly. Streeterville's high-rises rose around them, glass towers owned by men who paid Vince for protection or paid his enemies for the same thing. The city was layered, like that power on top, desperation underneath, and Vince Harlan moving between both worlds like a shadow. They descended into the underground parking garage beneath one of the Hancock's residential towers. The ramp spiraled down, lights flickering overhead. Tommy took the turns fast but controlled. Vince watched the side mirrors. The 2 pursuing cars appeared briefly, dark sedans, no lights, then vanished as Tommy swung into a service level and killed the headlights. Silence. Only the rain above muffled. Vince exhaled. We lost them, for now. Lily's hands were shaking under the blanket. I'm sorry, she whispered. He turned to her, startled. For what? For making trouble. For coming to find you. Maybe if I hadn't. Stop. His voice was gentle but firm. None of this is your fault. You did exactly what your mom told you to do. That's brave. That's more than most people would manage. Lily looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were huge, dark, searching. You're not mad at me, no. The word came out rougher than he intended. I'm mad at the world that let a 9-year-old walk 12 miles in the rain to find a stranger. I'm mad at whoever made your mom disappear. I'm mad at myself for not knowing you existed until tonight. The admission slipped out before he could stop it. Lily blinked. You think I might be... Vince closed his eyes for 1 second. The guilt inside him roared, violent, tearing, unstoppable. If Elena had been pregnant, if she had hidden a child from him, if someone had forced her to run, to fake her death, to raise a daughter alone, while he climbed higher into a life that would have endangered them both, he opened his eyes. We'll find out, he said quietly. But whatever the truth is, you're safe with me now. That's not changing. Lily stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, suspicion cracking, giving way to a fragile, burning trust. She leaned toward him just a fraction and rested her head against his arm. The movement was small, hesitant, but it felt enormous. Vince froze. Then slowly he lifted his arm and let her settle against his side. She was so light it frightened him. Bones sharp under skin. He could feel every breath she took, shallow, uneven, the breathing of a child who had gone too many nights without enough food or warmth. His heart tore open wider. Not romantic love, not possession. Something fiercer, paternal, primal. The need to protect her, to feed her, clothe her, keep her from ever knowing cold or hunger again, burned so intensely it hurt to breathe around it. The Escalade emerged from the garage and turned south toward Dearborn. Tommy drove in silence, glancing occasionally in the rearview mirror at the small girl curled against the boss's side. They reached the safe house, a nondescript brownstone in the Gold Coast windows, dark security cameras, discreet. Tommy parked in the private garage. Vince lifted Lily out carefully, as though she were made of glass. She did not protest. Her arms went around his neck, face buried against his shoulder. She smelled of rain and hunger and something faintly sweet like the cheap strawberry shampoo her mother must have bought in bulk. Inside the house was quiet, luxury hardwood floors, soft lighting, a kitchen larger than Lily's entire apartment. Vince carried her straight to the guest suite on the 2nd floor. The bathroom was marble and brass towels, thicker than any blanket she owned. He set her down on the edge of the tub. Wait here, he said. I'll get clothes. Something warm. Lily nodded, eyes glassy with exhaustion and shock. When he returned with a soft gray sweatshirt and fleece pants, both brand new tags still on, she stared at them like they might vanish. These are for me, she whispered. Yes. She reached out, fingers trembling, then pulled back. They're too nice. I'll get them dirty. Vince knelt. They're yours now. Get dirty. Get clean. Doesn't matter. They're yours. Tears filled her eyes. She tried to blink them away. No one's ever given me anything new before. Vince felt the words like a physical blow. He swallowed hard. Then it's about time. He stepped outside, closed the door, leaned against the wall. His hands shook. The guilt was no longer gnawing, it was devouring him alive. 9 years. A child. Alone. Hungry. Afraid. While he had sat in boardrooms and back rooms collecting power like it could fill the hole, Elena left. His phone buzzed again. Not Tommy this time. A blocked number, he answered. Harlan, a voice said low, distorted. You picked up something that doesn't belong to you. Vince's grip tightened. Who is this? You know who. The girl, the bracelet. Hand them over quietly, or we come collect. And we won't ask nicely. The line went dead. Vince stared at the phone. Rage and terror twisted together inside him, rage at the threat, terror for the child in the next room. He looked at the closed bathroom door, heard the faint sound of water running. He straightened. Whatever came next, Rossi's men, the blackmailer on the phone, the truth about Elena, he would face it. But the girl in there, small and trusting and impossibly brave, would never spend another night cold or hungry. Not while he still breathed. He opened the door a crack. Lily stood in the middle of the bathroom in the two big sweatshirt sleeves rolled up, looking at herself in the mirror like she did not recognize the girl staring back. She turned. Saw him. Smiled, small, shy, real. Thank you, she said. Vince felt something inside him break open completely. Not grief, not guilt. Love. Sudden. Overwhelming. The kind that rewrites everything. You're welcome, he whispered. And in that quiet, condensed moment, rain against the windows, steam rising from the shower, a child safe for the first time in her life. Vince Harlan understood that some graves were never meant to stay filled. The safe house on Dearborn was quiet except for the soft hiss of the shower running in the guest bathroom. Vince Harlan stood in the hallway outside the closed door, arms folded tight across his chest, forehead resting against the cool wall. Steam seeped under the doorframe in thin wisps. Every few seconds he heard the faint splash of water, the sound of a child trying to wash away 9 years of cold and hunger. He did not move. He could not. If he moved, the memories waiting just beneath the surface might spill out and drown him. 9 years earlier. Late spring 2016. Chicago smelled of lilacs and diesel. Vince was 21, leaner then, still wearing the uncertainty of youth beneath his bravado. He worked nights at a warehouse on the west side, legitimate work on paper, less legitimate after hours. That was how he met Elena Whitaker. She waitressed at the all-night diner across the street, 19 years old, hair pulled back in a messy knot apron stained with coffee and grease. She moved between tables like she was dancing around broken glass, careful, quick, always polite, even when customers snapped or left no tip. The first time she spoke to him, she brought black coffee without being asked. You look like you need this more than sleep, she said, voice soft but steady. He looked up from the ledger he was pretending to study. Her eyes were dark brown, tired but kind. Something in them made him put the pen down. They talked that night, then the next, then every night he came in. She told him about night classes at the community college nursing because she wanted to help people who could not help themselves. He told her half-truths about the warehouse, nothing about the envelopes of cash or the late-night meetings in back rooms. She never pressed. She just listened, chin on her hand, like his words mattered. One night in June, she waited for him after her shift. Rain had started soft at first. They walked toward the lakefront because neither wanted to go home to small, cold apartments. Under the streetlights, she stopped, looked at him, and said, I like you, Vince, but I'm scared of what you do when I'm not around. He told her the truth, then, or as much as he dared, that he was moving up in a world that did not forgive mistakes, that he wanted out eventually, that he would take her with him if she let him. She kissed him that night. First kiss under the Adler Planetarium dome, rain in their hair, city lights smearing across the water. She tasted like coffee and hope. They stole time after that, picnics on the lakefront with sandwiches she made, drives in his beat-up Chevy to watch the planes take off from Midway, nights in her tiny studio apartment above a laundromat windows open to the sound of dryers tumbling. She laughed easily. She cried when she thought he was not looking, about her mother's medical bills, about the rent she could not always pay, about how tired she was. He held her, then promising things he was not sure he could keep. In September, she told him she was pregnant. They sat on the fire escape outside her apartment. The city hummed below them. She handed him the test stick with shaking fingers. 2 pink lines. Vince stared at it until the plastic blurred. Then he pulled her into his arms so hard she gasped. I'm scared, she whispered against his neck. I've got you, he said. Both of you. But the world he belonged to did not celebrate new life. It saw vulnerability, weakness, distraction. His crew, older men who had mentored him, started asking questions. Where was he at night? Why the smile? Who was the girl? Vince tried to keep Elena separate. He moved her to a better apartment on the north side, paid the rent in cash, visited when he could. Every time he left, she looked at him with those same tired but kind eyes and said, Be careful, Vince. Come back to us. He tried. In December, the threats started. Anonymous notes slipped under her door. Phone calls with no one on the other end. A car following her home from the diner. Elena never told him how bad it got, not at first. She did not want to burden him. She thought she could handle it. She thought love would be enough. Then came the night in February. Vince was at a meeting downtown when his phone rang. Elena's number. He answered fast. Her voice was calm, too calm. They were here, Vince. 2 men. They said if I stay, they'll hurt the baby. They said you're marked. They said I have to disappear or we both die. He felt the world narrow to a pinprick. Where are you? Heading out of the city. I'll call when I'm safe. Elena, wait. The line went dead. He drove through the night, called every number, checked every place she might go. Nothing. 2 days later, the fire. A small house on the edge of Gary, Indiana. Elena's name on the lease. Charred remains. The bracelet, his bracelet recovered from the ashes. The police ruled it accidental. Faulty wiring. Vince knew better. Someone had lit the match. Someone had wanted her gone. Someone had wanted him to stay sharp, unburdened, ruthless. He buried an empty coffin. He stood in the rain beside a hole in the ground and let the guilt settle into his bones like concrete. Then he climbed. Higher. Harder. More money. More power. More silence. Until the hollow place inside him was just another room he never opened. Now, 9 years later, he stood outside a bathroom door, listening to a child hum under the shower. A small, uncertain sound, like she was afraid to enjoy it too much. The memories crashed over him again, sharper this time, edged with something new, rage at himself. He had failed Elena, failed the child she carried. Let the world believe she was dead, while he built an empire on her grave. The shower shut off. A moment later, the door opened. Lily stood there in the oversized sweatshirt and fleece pants, sleeves rolled up, hair dripping onto her shoulders. She looked impossibly small, impossibly clean. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from exhaustion so deep it showed in the whites. She saw his face and froze. "Are you okay?" Vince tried to speak. Could not. He cleared his throat. "You look better." She gave a tiny smile. "I feel better, thank you." He nodded once. "Come downstairs. There's food." She followed him to the kitchen. The space was bright granite counters, stainless appliances, a double oven he had never used. He opened the refrigerator. Inside, fresh fruit, eggs, milk, bread from a bakery on Michigan Avenue. He pulled out milk eggs, butter. Started making scrambled eggs the way his own mother once did. Slow, gentle, heat, constant stirring. Lily climbed onto a stool at the island. Her legs dangled. She watched him with wide eyes. "You cook?" she asked. "When I have to." She rested her chin on her hands. "Mom cooks when she's not too tired. She makes grilled cheese with tomato soup. It's my favorite." Vince's hand stilled on the spatula. "I'll remember that." The eggs finished. He slid them onto a plate, added toast, a sliced apple. Set it in front of her with a glass of milk. She stared at the food like it might vanish. "Go ahead," he said softly. She picked up the fork with careful fingers. Took one bite, then another. Then she ate like someone who had forgotten what full felt like, small bites at first, then faster, eyes closing with each swallow. When she finished, she looked up, cheeks flushed. "That was the best thing I ever ate," she whispered. Vince felt his throat close. He turned away, busied himself with the pan. The guilt tore deeper, violent now, ripping through every defense he had built. She had been hungry. For how long? While he ate in restaurants where the wine list was longer than her life. While he slept in a bed that cost more than her mother's rent. While he mourned a ghost and ignored the living child she had protected alone. He felt her watching him. "Sir," she said. He turned. "Why are you crying?" He touched his face. Wet. He had not realized. "I'm not," he lied. Lily slid off the stool, walked around the island, stood in front of him, bare feet on cold tile sleeves still rolled up. She reached up and took his hand. Her fingers were warm now. "It's okay to cry," she said. "Mom says it means your heart is working." Vince looked down at her. The child Elena had carried. The child he had never known existed until tonight. The child who had walked through rain and danger to find him. He knelt, pulled her into his arms. She stiffened at first, surprised, then melted against him, her head tucked under his chin. She smelled of soap and safety. He held her like she might disappear if he let go. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her damp hair. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Lily's arms tightened around his neck. "You're here now." The words broke something inside him wide open. Not grief, not guilt alone. Love sudden, consuming, the kind that rewrites every priority. He would burn the city down before he let anything touch her again. He would tear himself apart before he failed her twice. Outside, the rain kept falling. Somewhere in the city, enemies waited. Threats had been made. But in this kitchen, in the quiet between heartbeats, a father found his daughter. And the past 9 years began finally to bleed. The safe-house kitchen lights dimmed automatically at midnight, leaving only the soft under-cabinet glow and the faint blue pulse of the security panel on the wall. Lily sat at the island on a stool that was still too tall for her bare feet, swinging several inches above the floor. She had finished a second glass of milk, and now cradled the empty tumbler between both hands like it was something precious. Her eyelids drooped heavy with the kind of exhaustion that comes after years of never quite sleeping deeply enough to rest. Vince watched her from across the granite arms folded, fighting the urge to pick her up and carry her straight to bed. "You need sleep," he said quietly. Lily shook her head, small, stubborn. "Not yet. I have to tell you the rest. About Mom. About why she told me to find you." Vince felt the words land like stones in deep water. He pulled out the stool beside her and sat. The height difference meant he still loomed, but he leaned forward, elbows on the counter, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." Lily took a shaky breath. Mom worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices downtown at night, and then mornings at a laundromat on 63rd. She never complained, but I knew she was tired. Really tired. Sometimes she'd fall asleep, sitting up with her coat still on. She said the landlord kept raising the rent, and the heat got turned off twice last winter. We used blankets and wore them like capes. Her voice cracked. "I tried to help. I swept the hallway. I collected cans, but it wasn't enough." Vince's hands clenched on the countertop. The marble felt cold under his palms. He pictured his Elena wearing layers of coats indoors, breath visible in her own apartment while he slept between Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than her monthly rent. The image burned. 3 weeks ago, Lily continued, she came home different. Scared. She kept looking out the window. She wouldn't let me go to school. She said someone was watching us. She gave me the bracelet that night. Told me if she didn't come back, I should come to Rose Hill every Sunday until I found you. She said you were good once, that you'd remember her, that you'd help. Vince closed his eyes. Good once. The phrase sliced through him. He had not been good in a very long time. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. She said your name was Vince. She said you used to bring her white lilies when you were young. She smiled when she said it, even though she was crying. The room went very still. Vince felt the air leave his lungs. White lilies. He had brought them to her on their first real date, picked from a vendor on Michigan Avenue, because she said they reminded her of hope. He had forgotten that detail until this moment. Now it returned like a blade between the ribs. He opened his eyes. Did she say anything else? About who was watching? Lily shook her head. Just that they were dangerous. That they knew about me. That if they found out she was still alive, they'd come for both of us. Vince stood abruptly. The stool scraped back. He walked to the window, looked out at the dark street below. Rain still fell in silver sheets. Somewhere out there, people were moving, people who had already tried to follow them tonight. People who had made Elena disappear 9 years ago. People who now knew a child carried proof she had survived. His phone vibrated on the counter. Blocked number again. He answered without speaking. A voice, low, distorted, came through. "You're keeping something that belongs on a grave, Harlan. Give us the girl. Give us the bracelet. Or we start collecting debts another way." Vince's grip turned the phone white-knuckled. "You touch her, you die slow. Laughter cold, brief. Big words. But you're soft now. We've seen it. The child makes you weak. Hand her over. Walk away clean." The line went dead. Vince set the phone down with deliberate care. Inside him, something snapped clean final. Rage and terror fused into something sharper, resolve. He would not lose this child. Not to threats. Not to the past. Not to his own mistakes. He turned back to Lily. She had slid off the stool and now stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were huge, frightened. "They called again?" she asked. He nodded once. She took a step toward him, then another. Then she was running small feet, slapping tile, and threw herself against his legs. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. "Please." Vince dropped to one knee, wrapped his arms around her. She fit against his chest like she had always belonged there. "They won't," he said. The words came out rough, absolute. "I promise you that." He lifted her easily. She weighed almost nothing and carried her to the living room. The couch was wide, deep, covered in charcoal velvet. He sat with her in his lap blanket, pulled around them both. She curled against him, face buried in his shirt. Her breathing slowed, but she did not sleep. "Not yet. Tell me about your mom," he said quietly. "What she liked. What made her smile." Lily thought for a moment. "She liked the lake. We'd go to the beach sometimes early before anyone else. She'd take off her shoes and walk in the water even when it was cold. She said it made her feel clean. She sang when she thought I was asleep. Old songs. She had a pretty voice." Vince closed his eyes. He could hear Elena singing soft off-key sometimes, always gentle. The memory twisted inside him like wire. Outside tires hissed on wet pavement. Headlights swept across the front windows, slow, deliberate. Vince's body tensed. He shifted Lily behind him on the couch, shielding her with his back. "Stay down," he murmured. Lily obeyed, small hands clutching his shirt. The headlights lingered, then moved on. But Vince knew better. They were being watched. Stalked. The net was tightening. He stood, lifted Lily again, this time cradling her against his chest, and carried her upstairs to the master suite. The room was vast, king bed with linens that had never been slept in, floor-to-ceiling windows tinted against prying eyes, a sitting area with leather chairs. He set her on the bed, pulled back the covers. "You sleep here tonight," he said. "I'll be right outside the door." Lily looked at the bed, clean, white, enormous, then at him. "You won't leave, I won't leave." She climbed in. The pillows swallowed her small frame. She reached for his hand. "Stay until I fall asleep." Vince sat on the edge of the mattress, held her hand. Her fingers were still cold despite the shower and the warmth of the house. He rubbed his thumb across her knuckles, gentle, steady. Minutes passed. Her breathing deepened. But just before sleep took her, she whispered, "You're really my dad, aren't you?" Vince felt the question punch through every wall he had ever built. Tears, hot, sudden, burned behind his eyes. "I think I am," he said, voice breaking. "And if I am, I'm never letting you go again." Lily's eyes fluttered closed. A tiny smile curved her lips. "Good," she murmured. "Because I don't want to go." Vince stayed until her breathing evened into the slow rhythm of true sleep, the first deep, safe sleep she had known in years. Then he stood, walked to the door, paused, looked back at the small shape under the covers. The guilt inside him had become something else, something alive, burning, protective. He would tear Chicago apart brick by brick before he let anyone touch her. He would face Rossi's crew, the blackmailers, the ghosts of his past. He would do whatever it took, because for the first time in 9 years, the hollow place inside him had a heartbeat. He stepped into the hallway, closed the door softly. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. "Another blocked number," he answered. "Harlan," the voice said. "Time's up. We know where you are. Hand over the girl, or we burn this house down with both of you inside." Vince smiled, cold, lethal. "Come try," he said, and ended the call. Outside rain continued to fall on the city that had taken so much from him. But tonight, in a quiet bedroom on Dearborn Street, a father stood guard over his daughter. And the night journey, the real one, was only beginning. Dawn arrived in Chicago the way it always did in October, slow, reluctant gray light filtering through heavy clouds and smearing itself across wet streets. The safe house on Dearborn had gone quiet hours earlier, the kind of stillness that follows a night of threats and whispered promises. Vince Harlan had not slept. He sat in a leather armchair in the hallway outside Lily's door, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands. The bracelet lay on the small table beside him, silver catching the first pale rays that slipped past the blinds. Every few minutes he lifted his head to listen, making sure her breathing remained steady, even safe. Each breath she took felt like proof he had not failed completely. Yet, at 6:30 he stood, stretched, walked downstairs to the kitchen and brewed coffee in the expensive machine that hissed and gurgled like it was annoyed at being used so early. He made oatmeal plain, warm with a little cinnamon and a sliced banana. Simple food, comfort food, the kind Elena used to make when money was tight and the stove was the only source of heat in their apartment. He carried the bowl upstairs on a tray along with a glass of orange juice and a small plate of toast. Lily stirred when he opened the door. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes with the heels of her hands. The oversized sweatshirt had slipped off one shoulder. Her hair stood out in soft spikes from sleep. She looked at the tray, then at him, confusion clouding her features. "You're still here," she said, voice thick with sleep. "I told you I wouldn't leave." She blinked, looked around the room, the high ceilings, the silk drapes, the view of the lake glittering far below like scattered coins. "This is your house, one of them." She swallowed. "It's bigger than our whole building." Vince set the tray on the bedside table. "Eat something, then we talk about finding your mom." Lily reached for the spoon. Her hand shook slightly. She took one bite of oatmeal, closed her eyes at the warmth, then another. She ate slowly, carefully, as though afraid the food might disappear mid-bite. When the bowl was half empty, she looked up at him. "I'm scared," she admitted in a small voice. What if they hurt her because of me?" Vince sat on the edge of the bed. "They didn't hurt her because of you. Whatever happened, it started long before last night, and we're going to find her. Together." Lily nodded. But the fear did not leave her eyes. They left the safe house at 8 o'clock. Tommy drove. Vince sat in the back with Lily, her small hand in his. She wore new clothes he had ordered overnight, soft jeans, a cream sweater, sneakers with clean white laces. The tags were still in the pockets. She had not wanted to remove them, as though keeping them proved the clothes were truly hers. They drove south, Past the glittering towers of the Loop, past the river bridges, past neighborhoods where wealth gave way to struggle, Lily watched the city change through the tinted window. When they crossed into the south side, her shoulders tensed. She pointed. There, she said. That's our street. The building was 3 stories of cracked brick and peeling paint, windows boarded on the lower floors. A chain-link fence surrounded a patch of dirt that had once been grass. A sign on the front door read, "No trespassing, eviction notice, City of Chicago," dated 3 weeks earlier. Vince felt something cold coil in his gut. Lily's hand tightened in his. Mom's key still works. The super never changed the locks. They got out. Tommy stayed with the car, eyes scanning the street. Vince walked Lily to the door. She reached under a loose brick in the steps, retrieved a rusted key, and fitted it into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. The hallway smelled of mildew and old cooking oil. Stairs creaked under their feet. On the second-floor apartment 207, Lily hesitated, key in the lock. "What if she's not here?" she whispered. "Then we keep looking," Vince said. She opened the door. The apartment was 1 room, a mattress on the floor in the corner covered with a thin quilt, a hot plate on a folding table, a single chair, clothes hung on a line strung across the ceiling, faded shirts, patched pants, a child's coat with buttons missing. The refrigerator stood open and empty, except for a half carton of milk gone sour. No heat, no television, no photographs on the walls except one small snapshot taped beside the mattress, Elena, younger, smiling, holding a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. Lily walked inside slowly. She touched the quilt. This is where we slept. Together. Every night. Vince stood in the doorway. The sight of the room, the absolute bareness of it, hit him like a physical blow. Elena had lived here, raised their daughter here, survived here. While he had owned penthouses with views of the lake, private chefs, security teams, the disparity was obscene. The guilt rose in him again, violent, suffocating. Lily knelt beside the mattress, lifted the pillow. Underneath lay a folded piece of paper. She opened it with trembling fingers. "It's for me," she said. Vince stepped inside, closed the door behind him, read over her shoulder. "Lily, my brave girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to keep us safe. The bracelet will lead you to your father. His name is Vincent Harlan. He loved me once. He'll love you now. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him to keep you safe. I'm sorry I couldn't be the mother you deserved. I love you more than anything. Mom." Lily's face crumpled. She pressed the note to her chest. Tears came silently at first, then in great heaving sobs. Vince dropped to his knees beside her, pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder and cried like her heart was breaking. He held her, rocked her, whispered things he did not know he knew how to say. "I've got you. I've got you now. You're not alone anymore." The crying went on for a long time. When it slowed, Lily pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were red, swollen, searching. "You're really him," she said. "Aren't you?" Vince nodded. "I think so. I know so." She touched his face, small fingers on his cheek. "You look sad." "I am," he admitted. "I missed so much." Lily leaned her forehead against his. "We can catch up. Mom always said there's time for the important things." Vince felt the words pierce him. Time. He had wasted so much of it. A sound from the hallway, footsteps heavy, deliberate. Vince tensed, stood lifting Lily with him, placing her behind his body. The door opened without a knock. 3 men filled the frame. The one in front wore a leather jacket and a scar across his left cheek. "Rossi's crew," Harlan, the scarred man, said. "You've been busy. Collecting strays now." Vince's voice was ice. "Walk away, Marco. Last chance." Marco, Vince's own consigliere, the man who had stood beside him for 15 years, smiled thinly. "You've gone soft, boss. The girl makes you weak. Hand her over. We'll make it quick." Lily whimpered behind him. Vince felt her small hands clutch the back of his shirt. Marco took a step forward. Vince moved faster. One hand swept Lily behind him completely. The other drew the concealed pistol from his waistband in a single fluid motion. He did not raise it. He simply held it low, steady. "You take one more step toward her," Vince said quietly, "and you die in this hallway. I swear it on everything I have left." Marco's smile faltered. His men shifted uneasily. "You're choosing a kid over the family?" Marco asked. "I'm choosing my daughter," Vince said. The word daughter came out rough, raw, true. Silence stretched, thick, dangerous. Marco looked at Lily, small, terrified, clinging to Vince's leg. Something flickered in his eyes. Not compassion. Calculation. "Fine," he said at last. "But this isn't over. You can't protect her forever." He backed out. His men followed. The door closed. Vince exhaled, lowered the pistol, turned to Lily. She stared up at him, eyes wide with shock and something new wonder. "You called me your daughter," she whispered. Vince knelt, took her face gently between his hands. "Because you are. And no one is taking you from me again." Lily threw her arms around his neck, held on tight. In the bare, cold apartment, where Elena had survived alone for 9 years, a father and daughter clung to each other while the city waited outside, hungry, ruthless, watching. And Vince Harlan understood with terrible clarity that the fight for his daughter had only just begun. The apartment on 63rd Street felt smaller after Marco's men left, as though the walls themselves had drawn closer to listen. Dust motes floated in the thin afternoon light that managed to slip past the boarded window. Lily still clung to Vince's face, pressed against his chest, small body trembling with the aftershocks of fear and grief. Vince held her tightly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped protectively around her narrow back. He could feel every fragile bone beneath the thin sweater ribs, 2 prominent spines sharp under his palm. The knowledge that this child had lived on so little while he had wanted for nothing carved fresh wounds inside him deeper than any he had carried before. He kissed the top of her head, instinctive, unthinking, and felt her arms tighten in response. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "Right now." Lily lifted her face. Tear tracks streaked her cheeks, but her eyes were steady. "Can we take Mom's picture?" Vince nodded. She slipped from his arms, crossed the room on silent feet, and gently peeled the small photograph from the wall. Elena holding newborn Lily, both of them bathed in hospital light. Lily pressed the picture to her chest, then returned to him and tucked it into the pocket of her new sweater. Vince took her hand. They stepped into the hallway. The stairwell smelled of old grease and damp plaster. Halfway down, voices echoed from the street below, low, urgent, angry. Vince stopped. Listened. Saw the Escalade. "He's inside." Boss said no witnesses. Vince's jaw locked. He lifted Lily without a word, cradling her against his side like a shield made of glass. She wrapped her arms around his neck without protest. They descended the last flight, slowly, carefully. At the bottom, Vince set her down behind the stairwell door. "Stay here. Don't move until I say." Lily nodded, eyes wide but trusting. Vince stepped into the vestibule. 3 men waited outside the glass door, different from Marco's crew, younger, hungrier. One held a tire iron loosely at his side. They saw Vince and straightened. Harlan, the one with the tire iron, said, "Give us the kid. Walk away. Easy." Vince pushed the door open slowly, stepped onto the cracked sidewalk. Rain had stopped leaving the air heavy and cold. Streetlights flickered on, early casting long shadows. "No," Vince said simply. The man with the tire iron laughed, short, ugly. "You think you're untouchable because you run this city. We've got orders. The girl comes with us, alive or not." Vince felt the familiar cold settle over him, the calm he wore like armor in moments like this. But beneath it, something else burned terror for the child waiting inside. He could not let them reach the door, could not let them touch her. He took 1 step forward. Last chance. Walk away. The 3 men moved at once, spreading out, trying to flank him. Vince moved faster. He caught the first man's wrist as the tire iron swung, twisted hard. Metal clattered to the pavement. The man grunted, stumbled back. Vince drove an elbow into the second man's midsection, precise, controlled enough to fold him over, gasping. The third hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. Vince stepped between them and the entrance. "You don't get past me." The first man recovered, lunged again. Vince sidestepped, caught him by the collar, slammed him against the brick wall, not hard enough to break bone, but hard enough to stun. "Go home," Vince said quietly. "Tell whoever sent you that the girl is mine. Touch her, you die. Simple." The men backed off, breathing hard, pride wounded more than bodies. They retreated down the block, throwing curses over their shoulders. Vince exhaled, turned back to the door. Lily stood in the vestibule, having disobeyed just enough to watch. Her face was pale, eyes enormous. She looked at the men disappearing into the dusk, then at Vince's unhurt coat only slightly askew. "You didn't let them get me," she whispered. "No," he said. "I didn't." She ran to him, threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you." Vince lifted her again, held her close. Her heartbeat thrummed against his chest, fast, alive, trusting. He carried her back to the Escalade. Tommy had the door open, engine running. They drove north, away from the south side, away from the cold apartment and the ghosts it held. Lily sat beside Vince, the photograph of her mother clutched in both hands. She stared at it for a long time. "She looks happy," Lily said finally. "She was," Vince answered. "With you." Lily leaned against him. "I miss her." "I know." Silence settled, thick, heavy, with everything unsaid. Vince stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. The guilt inside him had become a living thing now, clawing relentless. He had failed Elena, failed their daughter, let her grow up in a place where heat was a luxury and food was rationed. While he had dined in restaurants where the wine cost more than Elena's yearly rent, the disparity felt criminal. The remorse felt murderous. Lily's small hand found his, squeezed. "You're shaking," she said softly. Vince looked down. His hand trembled in hers. He had not noticed. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything you went through, for not being there." Lily shook her head. "You're here now. That's what matters." The simple truth of it nearly undid him. They reached the safe house just after dark. Tommy parked in the garage. Vince carried Lily inside again. She did not protest. She had fallen asleep against his shoulder during the drive, exhausted beyond measure. He laid her on the couch in the living room, covered her with the cashmere throw. She curled into a small ball photograph still clutched to her chest. Vince knelt beside her, brushed damp hair from her forehead. The sight of her safe, warm, finally resting cracked something wide open inside him. Tears came without warning, silent and burning. He wiped them away, roughly ashamed of the weakness, then realized there was no one to see, no one to judge. He sat on the floor beside the couch, back against the cushions, watching her sleep. The room was quiet except for her soft breathing. Outside, Chicago moved on, sirens in the distance, traffic rumbling, life continuing its indifferent march. Inside, Vince Harlan sat in the stillness and let himself feel everything he had buried for 9 years. Guilt, rage, love. The love was the strongest, fierce, protective, consuming. He would give her everything, the best schools, the warmest bed, the safest life. He would dismantle his empire piece by piece, if that was what it took to keep her from ever knowing cold or hunger again. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another blocked number. He answered without speaking. Harlan, the distorted voice, said, "You can't hide her forever. We know where you are. We know who she is. Hand her over, or we take her the hard way." Vince's voice was calm, dangerously so. "You come for my daughter, you die. That's not a threat. That's a fact." He ended the call, set the phone down. Lily stirred, opened her eyes, saw him sitting on the floor beside her. "You're crying again," she whispered. Vince wiped his face. "Yeah." She reached out, touched his cheek. "It's okay. Mom said strong people cry too. It means they care." Vince took her hand, kissed her palm. "I care," he said, "more than anything." Lily smiled, small, sleepy, trusting. "I know." She closed her eyes again, fell back asleep. Vince stayed on the floor beside her all night, watching, guarding, loving. The monster inside him, the one that had ruled Chicago's shadows for years, was bleeding out, slowly replaced by something softer, something human. And in the quiet hours before dawn, Vince Harlan understood that redemption did not come in grand gestures or vast sums of money. It came in the steady breathing of a child who finally felt safe. It came in the fierce, burning need to protect her at any cost. It came in the realization that he would rather die than let her suffer one more night of cold. And that realization hurt more beautifully than anything he had ever known. The safe house on Dearborn remained wrapped in unnatural quiet through the morning hours of October 25, 2025. Outside, Chicago stirred slowly, delivery trucks rumbling, early commuters hurrying along sidewalks, but inside the thick walls and triple-pane windows, time seemed suspended. Vince Harlan had not moved from the armchair beside the couch where Lily slept. His coat lay discarded over the armrest. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, not from lack of sleep alone, but from the relentless churn of thoughts that had kept him staring at the ceiling until dawn finally bled through the blinds. Lily woke just after 9. She sat up slowly, the cashmere throw pooling around her waist like spilled cream. Her hair stood in soft disarray. She blinked at Vince, registering his unchanged position, the untouched coffee gone cold on the side table. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Not a question. An observation." Vince offered a small, tired smile. "I rested. That's enough." She studied him for a long moment, too long for a 9-year-old, then reached out and touched his hand. "You're cold." He turned his palm up. Let her small fingers rest in his. "I'm fine." She did not believe him. Neither did he. They moved to the kitchen together. Vince made breakfast again, toast with strawberry jam, scrambled eggs, fresh orange juice in a heavy crystal glass that looked absurdly delicate in her hands. Lily ate with careful precision, saving the crusts for last the way her mother had taught her. Vince watched every bite, cataloging the way color slowly returned to her cheeks, the way her shoulders relaxed, fraction by fraction. Each small sign of recovery felt like absolution he did not deserve. After breakfast, Lily asked to see the rest of the house. Vince walked her through the rooms, high ceilings, hardwood floors, polished to a soft gleam art on the walls that cost more than most people earned in a decade. She touched nothing without permission. When they reached the library, floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather-bound volumes, a window seat overlooking a private garden, she stopped. "Mom would have loved this," she whispered. "She read to me every night, even when she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open." Vince's throat closed. He pictured Elena in the dim light of their old apartment, voice soft and steady, turning pages while Lily curled against her side. He had never seen that, never shared it. Lily turned to him. "Can we go find her today?" He nodded. "We will, but first I need to make some calls. Secure things." She understood enough to know what that meant. She sat on the window seat with the photograph of her mother tracing Elena's face with one finger. Vince stepped into the hallway and dialed Tommy. "Boss, any movement overnight. 2 cars circled the block at 3A. Left when they saw the cameras. Marco's number keeps pinging the perimeter sensors. He's close." Vince's grip tightened on the phone. "Bring the second team in. Full perimeter. No one gets within 50 feet without me knowing. Already done. And boss, we found something. Security footage from the Southside apartment building. Time-stamped the night Elena disappeared. Marco was there, not just passing through. He went inside, stayed 23 minutes. The world tilted. Vince leaned against the wall. "You're sure, clear as day. Face on camera, time-stamped. He was carrying something when he left. Looked like a bag. Could have been files. Could have been." Vince ended the call. The phone dropped to his side. Marco, his consigliere, his oldest friend in this life, the man who had stood beside him at every major decision, every funeral, every victory. The man who had said 9 years ago, "She's a distraction, Vince. Cut her loose before she gets you killed." The man Vince had trusted with everything. The betrayal landed like a physical blow, deep, nauseating. Vince slid down the wall until he sat on the floor, knees drawn up, head in hands. The guilt that had been gnawing at him now roared into something monstrous. If Marco had been there that night, if Marco had orchestrated Elena's disappearance, if Marco had known about the pregnancy, about Lily. Vince pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes until stars burst behind his lids. He wanted to scream, wanted to tear the house apart, wanted to drive straight to Marco's door and demand answers with his hands around the man's throat. But Lily was in the next room. He forced himself to breathe. Slow, deliberate. He could not fall apart now. Not when she needed him steady. He stood, walked back to the library. Lily looked up from the window seat. "You're pale." Vince forced a smile. "Just thinking." She tilted her head. "About Mom, about a lot of things." She patted the cushion beside her. "Sit." He did. The window seat was wide enough for both of them. She leaned against his side. He put an arm around her shoulders, careful, gentle. She fit there perfectly. "Tell me something good," she said quietly. "Something about when you knew Mom." Vince swallowed. "She used to sing when she cooked. Terrible voice. Beautiful anyway. She'd burn toast and laugh about it. Said burnt toast tasted better with love on it." Lily smiled. She still did that. Burnt toast and everything. They sat in silence for a long moment, quiet, condensed stillness, amid the storm gathering outside. Then Vince's phone rang. Marco's name on the screen. Vince stared at it. Lily saw the name too. "Is that the bad man?" she asked. Vince nodded once. She reached over, pressed the answer button before he could stop her. Marco's voice came through smooth and familiar. "Vince, we need to talk." Vince took the phone. Put it on speaker so Lily could hear. "Talk." "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," Marco said. "The kid, the bracelet. Hand them over. I'll make sure the rest of the family stays quiet about your little distraction." Vince felt Lily tense beside him. "You staged it," Vince said. Voice flat, deadly calm. 9 years ago, you made her disappear. You faked the fire. You kept my daughter from me." Silence on the line, then a low laugh. "You always were slow when it came to feelings, Vince. She was going to ruin you. A wife, a kid. You'd have gone soft, walked away from everything we built. I did what was necessary. For the family." Vince's vision tunneled. "You took my family to protect the business." "I saved you," Marco said. "And now you're throwing it all away for a kid who doesn't even know what you really are." Lily's hand tightened on Vince's arm. She looked up at him, eyes wide, frightened but not running, not hiding. Vince looked down at her, saw Elena in her eyes, saw the future he had been denied, saw the past he could still reclaim. He spoke into the phone, voice low and final. "You come near her again, Marco, and I end you. Not the family way, not clean. I end you the way you deserve. He disconnected. Lily stared at him. He hurt Mom. Vince nodded. Yes. She pressed her lips together. Tears welled but did not fall. Then we have to stop him. Vince pulled her close. We will. Outside tires screeched on the street below. Engines revved. Voices shouted. Marco had not waited. Vince stood, moved Lily behind him, looked out the window. 3 black SUVs blocked the street. Men with guns not drawn but visible. Marco stepped out of the lead vehicle, looked up at the window, raised a hand in mocking salute. Vince turned to Lily. Stay here. Lock the door. Hide in the closet if you hear anything. She grabbed his hand. Don't go. I have to. Tears spilled over. You'll come back, Vince knelt, took her face in both hands. I swear it. I will always come back to you. She nodded. Let go. Vince walked out of the room, closed the door. Heard the lock click behind him. He descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. Opened the front door. Marco waited on the sidewalk, flanked by 6 men. Vince stepped outside, closed the door behind him. Marco smiled, thin, satisfied. End of the line, Vince. Give me the girl. I'll let you walk. Vince looked at the man who had once been his brother in all but blood. Looked at the betrayal written in every line of his face. No, Vince said. Marco sighed. Then we do this the hard way. Vince smiled, cold, calm, certain. Try. And the street outside the safe house on Dearborn became the battlefield where a father fought to keep his daughter, where guilt finally met justice, where love fierce burning paternal refused to yield. The street outside the Dearborn safe house had gone eerily still after Marco's men retreated. No sirens followed. No backup arrived. Only the low, steady patter of rain returning, tapping against the black SUVs like impatient fingers. Vince Harlan stood on the sidewalk, coat open to the wind pistol still in his hand but pointed at the ground. His breathing came slow, and measured the only outward sign of the storm inside him. Behind every calm word he had spoken to Marco, a scream had been building for years now. It had form, name, face. Marco, the man he had trusted with his life, his secrets, his empire. The man who had stolen 9 years of fatherhood and replaced them with grief. Vince turned back toward the house. The front door opened before he reached it. Lily stood there, small, barefoot, the cashmere throw draped around her shoulders like a cape. Her eyes were wide, searching his face for blood, for injury, for any sign the world had taken another piece of him. You're okay, she said. Not a question. A desperate hope. Vince holstered the pistol, walked up the steps, knelt in front of her on the wet stone. I'm okay. She launched herself into his arms. The blanket slipped to the ground. Vince caught her, lifted her against his chest, felt her heartbeat hammering against his own. She was shaking, not from cold, but from the terror of watching a man she had only just found walk into danger for her. I heard shouting, she whispered into his neck. I thought they took you. Never, he said. The word came out rough, raw. They'll never take me from you. He carried her inside, closed the door, locked it. The house felt different now, smaller, more vulnerable, as though the walls themselves understood the war had moved indoors. Tommy appeared from the hallway, face grim, perimeters holding. But Marco's not done. He's calling in favors. We've got maybe an hour before the next wave. Vince nodded once. Set Lily on the couch, pulled the blanket around her again. She clung to his hand even after he tried to let go. I need to talk to Tommy, he told her gently. 5 minutes. I'll be right here. I promise. She looked at him, really looked, searched his face for lies, found none. Slowly, reluctantly, she released his fingers. Vince stepped into the study with Tommy, closed the door. Tell me everything, Vince said. Tommy laid it out cold, precise, professional. Marco had been siphoning money for 18 months. Small amounts at first, then larger. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the kind of theft only a man with full access could manage. And the fire 9 years ago, security footage from a gas station 2 blocks away showed Marco's car parked nearby 15 minutes before the blaze started. A gas can in the trunk, clear as daylight. Vince listened without expression. Inside, the betrayal burned white hot. He had given Marco everything, trust, power, brotherhood. In return, Marco had taken his family and sold it for cash. And the threats tonight, Vince asked. Marco wants the girl gone. She's proof, living proof. If she talks, if she testifies, the whole operation unravels. He's desperate. Vince leaned against the desk. The weight of it settled deeper, guilt layered on guilt, rage layered on rage. He had built this life, allowed men like Marco to rise beside him, created the conditions that made Elena run, that made Lily grow up hungry. He looked at Tommy. I want him alive. I want him to look me in the eye when I end this. Tommy nodded. We'll bring him in. They stepped back into the living room. Lily had not moved. She sat exactly where he had left, her knees drawn up, photograph of her mother resting on them. When she saw him, relief flooded her face, followed immediately by worry. "You're mad," she said softly. Vince crossed the room, knelt in front of her again. "Not at you. Never at you. At the bad man, at someone I trusted once." Lily reached out, touched the scar on his left eyebrow, a thin white line from a fight years before she was born. "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore." She traced it gently. "Good." Vince caught her hand, kissed her knuckles. "I need to go out for a little while. Tommy's going to stay with you. You'll be safe here. Safer than anywhere else." Lily's eyes filled. "Don't go. I have to finish this, so no one can ever scare you again." She looked down at the photograph, pressed her lips together, then nodded, small brave. "Okay, but you have to come back. Promise." Vince pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise." He stood, looked at Tommy. "No one gets near her. You understand?" Tommy nodded. "Not while I'm breathing." Vince kissed the top of Lily's head one last time, then walked out the front door into the rain. The street was empty now. No SUVs, no men, only wet pavement and the hiss of tires in the distance. Vince walked to the corner, turned down a narrow alley. He knew Marco would be watching. Knew the man could not resist a final confrontation. He was right. Marco waited at the far end of the alley, leaning against a brick wall under a flickering street lamp. Alone, no backup. Just him, leather jacket, thin smile, eyes cold. "You always did like dramatic entrances," Marco said. Vince stopped 10 feet away. "You staged her death." Marco shrugged. "I saved the family. You were going soft. A wife. A kid. You'd have walked away from everything we built. I did what was necessary. You took my daughter. I gave you freedom. Power. You're welcome." Vince's hands clenched at his sides. "You kept her in poverty. Cold. Hungry. While I lived like a king. You watched her grow up without me and did nothing." Marco's smile faded slightly. She was collateral. Nothing personal. Vince took one step closer. "Everything about this is personal." Silence stretched between them, rain dripping from fire escapes, distant traffic, the city breathing. Marco straightened. "Give me the girl. I'll disappear. You keep the empire. Clean break." Vince looked at the man he had once called brother, saw the stranger he had become. "No." Marco sighed, pulled a pistol from inside his jacket, pointed it at Vince's chest. "Then we end it here." Vince did not flinch. "You won't shoot me. You need me alive. The family needs me. Without me, everything collapses." Marco's hand wavered just a fraction. Vince took another step. "You already lost. The moment you touched my family, you lost." Marco's eyes flickered. Doubt, fear, then resolve. He raised the gun higher. A sound, small, soft, from the mouth of the alley. "Stop!" Lily stood there, blanket around her shoulders. Tommy behind her face, grim gun drawn, but lowered. She had slipped out, followed him, refused to stay hidden. Vince felt his heart stop. "Lily, go back inside." She shook her head, walked forward, small steps, trembling. Stopped beside him, looked up at Marco. "You hurt my mom," she said. Voice quiet, steady. "You made her scared. You made us cold. You made us hungry." Marco stared at her. Something cracked in his expression, something human. "You're just a kid," he said. "I'm his daughter," Lily answered. "And you can't have me." Marco looked from her to Vince, back to her. The gun trembled. Vince stepped in front of Lily. "Last chance, Marco. Drop it. Walk away. Or I end this." Marco's eyes filled sudden, shocking tears. "I did it for us," he whispered. "For the family." "You destroyed the only family that mattered," Vince said. Marco looked at Lily one last time, then slowly, painfully lowered the gun. Tommy moved fast, disarmed him, cuffed him, dragged him toward the waiting SUV. Marco did not resist. As they passed, Marco looked back at Vince. "You were right," he said. "I lost." Vince did not answer. When the SUV pulled away, Vince turned to Lily, knelt, pulled her into his arms. She was crying again, quiet, exhausted tears. "You came after me," he said. "You shouldn't have. I couldn't let you go alone." Vince held her tighter, felt her small heart beating against his, felt his own breaking open, wider guilt, love, relief, terror all at once. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything you've been through, for every night you were cold, for every meal you missed. I'm so sorry." Lily pulled back, touched his face. "You're here now. That's what matters." Vince closed his eyes. Let the tears come. In the rain-soaked alley behind the safe house on Dearborn, a father held his daughter and let the past bleed out at their feet. Marco was gone. The betrayal was exposed. And the healing, the second deeper healing, had begun. Not with words, not with promises, with a small hand in his, with trust so complete it burned, with love so fierce it rewrote everything. 2 weeks had passed since the alley confrontation on Dearborn Street. Chicago had slipped deeper into late October, the wind off the lake now carrying the first sharp promise of winter. The safe house had become a fortress of quiet routines. Breakfast at 8, walks in the private garden. When the rain paused, evenings spent reading aloud from the leather-bound books Lily had once only dreamed of touching. Vince had canceled every meeting, delegated every responsibility, turned off every phone except the one Tommy carried. The world outside could wait. Lily could not. She had gained weight slowly, carefully. Her cheeks had filled out enough that the sharp angles of hunger were softening. Color had returned to her lips. She slept through the night now, no longer waking, with the startled gasp of someone expecting cold or danger. Yet Vince watched her constantly cataloging every small recovery, as though it might vanish if he looked away. The guilt had not left him. It had only changed shape. It lived in the quiet moments when she laughed at something small, when she reached for his hand without thinking, when she called him Dad for the first time without hesitation. Each sound of the word felt like forgiveness he had not earned. That morning, October 25th, 2025, Vince woke before dawn. He made coffee in the kitchen strong black the way he had always taken it, and carried a mug to the window seat where Lily liked to sit and watch the lake. She was already there, knees drawn up, the photograph of Elena resting on them. She had not turned on any lights. Dawn light filtered through the blinds in pale gray bars across her face. "You're up early," Vince said softly. She looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "I couldn't sleep." He sat beside her, set the coffee down untouched. "Bad dream." She shook her head, reached into the pocket of her sweater, the same cream one she had worn every day since he bought it, and pulled out a folded envelope. Plain white, no address, just her name in Elena's careful handwriting. "She left this," Lily said, "in the lining of her coat. I found it yesterday when I was folding it. I didn't want to open it alone." Vince felt the air leave the room. Lily held the envelope out to him. Her hand shook. Vince took it. The paper felt fragile, as though it might crumble under the weight of what it carried. He looked at Lily. She nodded, small, certain. He opened it. A single sheet of notebook paper. Elena's handwriting neat, slightly slanted, the same hand that had once written grocery lists and birthday cards. "My, Lily, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry. I tried to keep us safe. I tried to keep you safe. I never told you everything about your father. His name is Vincent Harlan. He loved me once, loved me enough that I believed we could have a life together. But the world he lived in was dangerous. People wanted him to stay hard, stay cold. They saw me as a weakness. They saw you as a target. When I found out I was pregnant, I was afraid. Not of you, of what they would do to keep him from having anything soft to lose. I ran. I hid. I changed my name. I made sure no one could find us. But they did. Marco found us. He came to the apartment. He said if I stayed, they would take you. If I fought, they would kill us both. He gave me a choice: disappear completely or watch you grow up in a world that would never let you be safe. I chose to disappear. I staged the fire. I left the bracelet, his bracelet, so you could find him one day. I knew he would recognize it. I knew he would remember. I knew he would protect you better than I ever could once he understood. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I let you think I was dead. I'm sorry I let you live cold and hungry while I tried to keep the danger away. Every night I held you, I told myself it was worth it if it kept you alive. Every time I saw you shiver, every time you went to bed hungry, it broke me a little more. If Marco comes for you again, run to your father. He will keep you safe. He will love you the way I always wanted him to love us both. I love you more than anything in this world. You were the best thing I ever did. Be brave, my girl. Be kind. And tell your father I never stopped loving him. Tell him I'm sorry I couldn't stay." Mom Vince read the letter twice. 3 times. Each word landed like a fresh wound, clean, precise, devastating. When he finished, he could not speak. Tears came without sound, hot and relentless. He pressed the paper to his forehead as though he could absorb her through the ink. Lily watched him, silent, waiting. When he finally lowered the letter, his voice was broken. "She chose this," he said. "She chose to die so you could live, so you could find me. She carried that alone. For 9 years. Lily reached for the letter. "Read it again." When she finished, she folded it carefully and pressed it against her heart. "She didn't want me to know," Lily whispered. "She wanted me to think she was just gone, so I wouldn't hate her for leaving." Vince pulled her into his arms, held her so tightly she gasped, then loosened his grip just enough to let her breathe. "She loved you more than anything," he said against her hair. "More than her own life. Lily cried, then quiet, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Vince rocked her. Tears streamed down his own face, soaking into her sweater. He had mourned Elena for 9 years, believing she was dead. Now he mourned her again, knowing she had chosen death so their daughter could live. Knowing she had endured every cold night, every skipped meal, every moment of terror alone, so that Lily would one day find him. The guilt was no longer gnawing. It was consuming. It tore through him in waves, violent, merciless. He had built walls of power and money, while Elena tore herself apart to protect their child. He had grieved in luxury, while she survived in poverty. He had let Marco rise beside him, while Marco plotted to erase the only family Vince had ever truly wanted. He held Lily until her crying slowed, until she rested against him, exhausted, spent. "I'm sorry," he whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry she had to do this alone. I'm sorry for every night you were cold, every day you were hungry. I'm sorry I didn't know." Lily lifted her head, looked at him with Elena's eyes, dark, steady, kind even now. "You're here now," she said. That's what she wanted. Vince closed his eyes. Let the words sink in. Let them hurt. Let them heal. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious, indifferent. Inside, a father and daughter sat together in the gray dawn light, holding the last letter of a woman who had loved them enough to die for them. Vince pressed his lips to Lily's forehead. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be afraid again," he said. "I will protect you. I will love you. I will never let anyone hurt you. I swear it on her memory, on everything I have left." Lily nodded against his chest. "I believe you," she whispered. And in that quiet, condensed moment, rain against the windows, dawn light turning gold, a child safe in her father's arms. Vince Harlan felt the final piece of his old life shatter. The monster was gone. What remained was a man who would rebuild everything piece by piece, promise by promise, around the daughter he had almost lost forever, and around the woman who had given everything so that moment could exist. The days after Elena's final letter arrived blurred into something softer, quieter, almost sacred. October gave way to the first week of November in 2025, and Chicago wore winter's earliest colors, bare branches against gray skies, breath visible in the morning air. Inside the Dearborn safe house, however, time moved differently. The rooms that had once felt like a temporary refuge now carried the gentle weight of permanence. Lily's small sneakers lined up neatly by the door. Her drawings, crayon sketches of a man and a girl holding hands beside a lake, were taped to the refrigerator. The photograph of Elena rested in a simple silver frame on the mantel, placed where sunlight touched it every morning. Vince Harlan had not returned to the streets. Meetings were canceled. Calls went unanswered. The empire he had built over 15 years continued to function through trusted lieutenants, but he no longer stood at its center. He had begun dismantling the most violent parts, quietly, methodically redirecting money into places that would never have seen it before: shelters for single mothers, after-school programs on the South Side, medical clinics that did not ask for insurance. Each decision felt like cutting away dead tissue so something living could finally breathe. Lily watched him do it. She asked questions, gentle, curious ones. "Why are you giving money to that place? Will the kids there have warm coats now?" Vince answered everyone honestly. He told her about the nights he had spent in penthouses while she and her mother shivered under thin blankets. He told her about the guilt that still woke him at 3 a.m, about the remorse that felt like a second heartbeat. He did not hide the darkness of his past. He wanted her to know the man she had chosen to trust had not always been worthy of it. One afternoon they walked to the lakefront together. The wind was sharp, but Lily wore the new wool coat he had bought her, deep blue lined with fleece, the kind of coat that cost more than Elena's rent for an entire year. Lily held his hand tightly. She had not let go of it in public since the night Marco was taken away. They stopped at the water's edge. Waves slapped against the concrete barrier in steady rhythm. Lily looked out across the gray expanse, then up at him. "Do you think Mom can see us?" she asked. Vince swallowed. "I think she does. Every day." Lily nodded slowly. "I hope she's not cold anymore." Vince knelt so they were eye level. "She's not cold. She's free. And she made sure you would never be cold again." Lily's lip trembled. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. Vince held her close, feeling the small, steady warmth of her against his chest. The disparity that had once torn him apart, his towers of glass and steel, versus her nights of wind and hunger, had not disappeared. It had transformed. Every coat he bought her, every meal he placed in front of her, every night he sat beside her bed until she slept, was an act of restitution. Not enough, never enough, but necessary. They returned home as the sun dipped low. Tommy waited at the door, expression unreadable. "Boss," he said quietly, "Marco's in custody. Federal agents picked him up this morning. RICO charges. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. The evidence you gave them was airtight. He won't see daylight for a long time." Vince nodded once. No satisfaction. Only closure. Tommy hesitated. There's something else. A package arrived. No return address. Postmarked from a P.O. box in Gary. Vince took the small padded envelope. Inside, a single white lily pressed between 2 sheets of tissue paper and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. She wanted you to have this. She kept it all these years. A friend who helped her hide. Vince stared at the flower. Dried, fragile, still perfect in its preservation. Elena had carried it with her through every cold apartment, every skipped meal, every night she held their daughter and lied to keep her safe. He pressed it to his lips, closed his eyes. Lily watched him. Is that from Mom? He nodded. She saved it. For us. Lily reached out, touched the petals gently. It's still beautiful. Yes, Vince whispered. It is. That evening he took Lily to the rooftop terrace. The city spread below them, lights glittering like scattered stars. He had never brought anyone here before. It had always been his place to think, to plan, to harden himself against the world. Now he sat with his daughter on the wide stone bench, her small frame tucked against his side under a thick blanket. The wind was cold, but they were warm. Dad, she said softly. He looked down at her. I'm glad you found me, she said. Even if it took a long time. Vince felt the words pierce him, clean, bright pain. I'm glad you found me, he answered. You saved me. Lily rested her head on his shoulder. We saved each other. They sat in silence as the sky darkened and the city lights grew brighter. Father and daughter. 2 people once separated by violence, by fear, by betrayal. Now bound by something stronger than any empire. Vince spoke quietly into the night. I'm going to build something new, he said. A place where kids like you, kids who've been cold, hungry, scared, can be warm, can learn, can feel safe. I'm going to name it after your mom, Elena's house. And every child who walks through its doors will know they're not alone. Lily looked up at him. She would like that. I think she would. He kissed the top of her head, and in that moment, high above the city that had once broken them both, Vince Harlan understood that redemption was not found in power or money or vengeance. It was found in the small, steady act of choosing love over fear every single day. It was found in the daughter who had walked barefoot through rain to find him. It was found in the woman who had given her life so that love could continue. Knowledge is the quiet light that guides us forward. Knowledge helps us see the pain we caused and the healing we can still offer. Knowledge reminds us that every life matters, no matter how small or overlooked. Knowledge teaches us compassion even when the world has shown us cruelty. Knowledge opens the door to change. A lesson lives in every act of kindness we choose over convenience. A lesson waits in the courage it takes to face our mistakes. A lesson grows when we protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. A lesson shines when wealth is used to lift others, rather than to isolate ourselves. A lesson endures when love proves stronger than any empire built on fear. Education is not only books and classrooms. It is the daily practice of empathy. Education is learning to listen to the stories we once ignored. Education is teaching the next generation that no child should ever know hunger or cold. Education is building bridges where walls once stood. Education is the lifelong promise to do better. To everyone watching this video, may you be blessed with good health, a joyful life, and daily peace that settles deep in your heart. If this story touched you, please kindly like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. We share engaging videos every day filled with emotion, hope, and lessons worth carrying. How did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Perhaps a moment when love crossed boundaries of wealth and poverty, or when someone appeared exactly when you needed them most. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one, and it means so much to hear the emotions and reflections that come straight from your hearts. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental. Thank you for being here. I'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye for now.